Well, hello, Power Partners. Welcome to the informational playground and barnyard of Starstyle. Be the Star You Are, coming to the airwaves under the auspices of Be the Star You Are charity. I am Cynthia Brian, and we're broadcasting on Voice America Media. This is the Empowerment Channel. In today's show, we're going to be tackling the topics of credit card fraud, depression, and the loneliness that is tending to happen with men in certain generations. So I hope that you will stay tuned and get some good information on here. The miracle moment for today, brought to you by Be the Star You Are, is located at bethestaryouare.org. It's from Buddha. There are two fatal errors that keep great projects from coming to life. Number one, not finishing. Number two, not starting. Yeah, the only way to start is to start, right? All right, well, we're going to get right into our first segment, which is about credit card fraud. And all of us have probably seen small, amounts on our credit card in the past, and it was probably okay. But we have to be really careful these days because that little amount, maybe it's $1.15, $2.22, or some, random number, and it has a you really can't tell who the merchant was because you think maybe it's a parking fee, or you bought some candy or whatever it was, especially if you use your credit card a lot. Well, those are really red flags. Consumer protection groups and law enforcement say scammers are counting on you to overlook these. There have been these recent warnings. They describe the pattern that's called ghost tapping, and it's when there are these little small unfamiliar charges that show up on your cards without any clear point of purchase. And these amounts are really easy to miss. However, they could be the signal that somebody has your card, or and it's more than a simple billing error. So we really have to be aware of these signs, as because what might be happening is scammers are testing to see if this credit card is good and if you are just not even looking at it. And the BBB, the Better Business Bureau, is warning that this ghost tapping is really on the rise. In simple terms, it means a payment can be triggered without you even making a purchase. So, one reported method involves compromised payment terminals that actually are quietly processing low value contactless charges. And another involves unauthorized NFC readers that are operating at close range. And usually those are in crowded places like in airports, it could be restaurants. So in those cases, a card or a mobile wallet can be charged with when it's just, within a few inches of your credit card. And because these transactions run through standard contactless payment networks, they appear as normal card present purchases. And there's usually no clear sign on your statement that anything was wrong. So we have to be really aware of these low dollar transactions. They are used to confirm that a card can be charged without being declined. So when a small charge goes through, it signals to the scammer that this card is active, usable, and then it establishes a working payment path. And then what the scammers do is they run additional transactions using the same card details, sometimes across different merchants or terminals. And people don't even notice these charges. And at that point, the transaction appears as a completed purchase, not a pending authorization. So, what it means is that a charge looks harmless. It could actually be the first step of a really big fraud attempt. And then over time, these fraudulent charges may extend beyond, one card. If your payment details have been exposed or are stored even in a compromised system, they can be reused until you actually cancel the card. So you could get multiple charges over several days or even billing cycles. And this is another reason you really have to be checking your financial statements either online, or if you get paper statements, checking them very carefully, because it's very quickly how it leads to fraud. Now, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, advises you to report unauthorized charges as soon as possible or as soon as you see them. And in practice, that means contacting the whoever issues your card when you see a charge you don't recognize. I've had several times I've had my card canceled, and it's usually very inconvenient, but it does, it does protect you. And of course, it is protecting the credit card companies. Now, credit cards typically offer stronger fraud protection than debit cards, because on a debit card, money can be withdrawn directly from your bank. And under federal law, liability for unauthorized credit card charges is limited, but it doesn't always work that way with debit cards. So if you spot a charge you don't recognize, act really quickly, and that can protect your rights under the federal law, and it can also limit the amount of damages. Also, it's recommended by the FTC to check your checking account regularly and flag anything that's unfamiliar as soon as it appears. The more things is, if you see a charge right away and you open a dispute through your issuer's, application or a customer service line, usually what will happen right away is the credit card will be canceled. You'll be sent a new one within 7 to 10 days. But according to the Fair Credit Billing Act, you have to send billing error notices within 60 days of the statement that includes the charge. And then the credit card issuer is required to acknowledge that you have a dispute within 30 days and resolve it in no more than 2 billing cycles or no more than 90 days. So what are you checking when you're checking your credit cards is the merchant name, the date, the amount, and sometimes, the payment is under a processor or a parent company. There's usually a phone number, and if not, you can call your credit card company and ask them if they have a number or what it says. And I've had sometimes I don't recognize something, I call, and it turns out it is a transaction I made. But there's also been times when I don't recognize something and it's not a transaction I made, and it was a scammer. And so the credit card had to be challenged and changed. So if you review transactions infrequently, or you're just relying on monthly statements, unauthorized charges may only surface after they've already posted. And then sometimes by then, there's multiple transactions and they might appear across different dates or merchant names, and it could make it really hard to spot. So you have to be really, really on the alert. And banks usually don't, well, sometimes if it's a big transaction, your bank would alert you. I know that, I have gotten those things from a card saying, did you authorize this payment? And sometimes I've gotten them when it says to me, have you authorized, even if it was a small one. So again, be very cautious and see if you can spot any suspicious activity. Now, Apple Pay and Google Pay use tokenization, which means your real card number is not shared with the merchants, but contactless cards can be read at close range. So don't leave them exposed in any busy environment. And again, you really don't want to rely only on the monthly statements. Try to review your transactions online every few days if that's possible. Now, even with those, by doing that, suspicious activity may not show up in one place or it may not show up right away. So the best thing to have is identity and credit monitoring services. And there have been so many fraud and scam attacks on companies lately that most people might even have a complimentary identity and credit monitoring service. I know I personally have several, so I feel pretty good about that. And those really monitor for new inquiries, account openings, and any charges that may not appear on a bank app. Now, some services can also scan any known data breaches. Some of my identity things, they look into the dark web and they see what has been exposed as far as your personal information. So if a suspicious activity is detected, many platforms will offer a tool to take that action really quickly, and that they may look at your credit file and working with a US-based fraud resolution team to contact card issuers, dispute the charges, and close any affected uh, accounts. And the good news about those things is that when you have an identity credit monitoring service, it usually includes some kind of insurance that they will do. They will help to replace and repair your identity. So check all of that out because you want to, again, catch a suspicious charge early, report it quickly, and just remember you want to stop the fraud before it escalates because a few dollars can be that first sign that your payment details are active, vulnerable, and giving attackers a way to test and expand access without raising any alarm. So the sooner the better, the easier it is to stop. And this is something where we really have to increase our habits of checking all of our transactions regularly and going over them carefully because the fraud usually starts very, very small and then it gets very, very big. Well, you're listening to Cynthia Brian. This is Starstyle, Be the Star You Are. We're coming to you on the Voice America Media, the Empowerment Channel. I'll be right back with a business bite, and then we'll get into the our next segment. Thanks for staying with me, and I'll be right back. How do you build and maintain long-term client relationships? Try some of these suggestions. You want to be upfront because honesty is always the best policy. And even though people, might have some bad news for you, it's best to tell the truth when any problems arise. You also want to listen with both ears. Of course, we always say we have two ears and one mouth so that, we listen more and talk less. And you'll strengthen your relationships by really listening to people, your clients, your customers, and do what you say you're going to do. In other words, show up, and follow through. And put people first. Make every client or customer feel like he or she is the most important person in the world to you because they are. And that means paying close attention and not multitasking while in conversations. And then remember that gratitude works. Excuse me. Be grateful, say so. The more gratitude you show, the more you'll have to be thankful for. Remember, you're the star of your own performance. Turn your passions into profits. I'm Cynthia Brian from Starstyle. Visit cynthiabrian.com. That's Brian with an I.com. I have to take a drink of water. So I got to pause for a second. Sorry. Okay. I am going to, sorry about that. I am coming back. You're listening to Cynthia Brian. This is Star Style, Be the Star You Are. And we are back and we're going to talk about loneliness. The World Health Organization estimated that 1 in 6 people globally have battled feelings of loneliness. Now, back in the fall of 2025, Governor Gavin Newsom introduced the California Men's Service Challenge. It was a mentorship program aimed at improving social connection for young men and boys because while mental health concerns have a significant impact, regardless of factors such as age and gender, males in midlife today are often confronted with unique social pressures, ones that maybe their fathers, grandfathers, great grandfathers, uncles never had to deal with, and that can lead to increased loneliness, depression, and even anxiety. Now, so many men in Generation X, those are people that were born between 1965 and the early part of 1980, were also taught to be the breadwinners. But as they come into adulthood, they have faced mounting housing costs, college tuitions that have risen crazy, and then very much societal stressors. And Gen X men were promised stability if they played by the rules. But there have been decades of economic upheaval, rising costs, and the disappearing safety nets. So, what it's done is it's left many burdens that they can't afford to drop. And these men are trying to live up to a model that no longer fits the world that they inherited. And this creates anxiety, it creates stress, and it creates depressions. And the discrepancy can be amplified by a history as latchkey kids because both moms and dads in this generation and most generations since then have been in the workforce. And this instilled many men in the demographic with a desire for self sufficiency. And other factors have also included reaching an age where divorce is more common, social division at the national level, and worries around getting older. And also, we had those effects of the pandemic, which, according to a study by the Roots of Loneliness Project, increased loneliness for men in Gen X by, listen to this, 130%. And it has also increased a lot of the social challenges. So what the reality is that men have fewer, less intimate friendships than women, and they are less likely to have a close confidant, particularly someone other than a spouse. And unlike women, men are less likely to reach out to others for support when they need it. So, the importance of forging connections, whether it's in a formal group or therapeutic setting, or just simply through friendships that foster intimacy, is really important. So, what are some ways that men can do it? They can volunteer, they can join team sports, they can delve into hobbies, they can set up a routine engagement with a friend, maybe even a church or synagogue, a temple group, something like that. As most men move into later life, the meaningful relations become more important than status and achievement. And that calls for putting effort into building friendships and deepening existing connections with those that we care about, and often allows to move away from social competition and more towards social connecting. So, joining a club, doing something with others, and again, maybe like Lions Club or Rotary or Knights of Columbus or any of those, that can really foster some good camaraderie. And then we really need to know about how to recognize depression and to be aware of it. If you start losing sleep, if your energy levels are low, if you lose your appetite or your interest in activities that you used to enjoy, it could be a sign that depression is the cause. The National Institute of Mental Health reports that in 2021, which was a few years ago, 8.3% of US adults had at least one major depressive episode. And the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention also found that around 4% of children, if from as young as 3 to age 17, had been diagnosed with depression from 2021 to 2022. So this is a condition that is treatable, and it is a type of mental health condition. Depression is an ongoing sense of sadness or emptiness, and most depressive episodes can last 4 to 8 months. So, in general, some people have episodes that last a couple of weeks, while others could have symptoms that last for months or years. And who suffers from this? Besides what I was saying about the men, it can really affect people of any age, gender, or background. Research from the CDC shows that the prevalence of depression is higher usually in females, although males have been showing a lot of loneliness lately, which can lead to depression. And it can present itself in a lot of different ways. Now, children might show signs of irritability or have trouble concentrating at school. Teens may struggle with feelings of loneliness or show a change in social behavior or school performance. And adults experience emotional symptoms like hopelessness or guilt or they can have physical symptoms like changes in appetite or sleep, as I was saying. So the causes appear, to be social, psychological, biological, and they can go along with health problems, maybe even medications or substance abuse. Now, for some people, it could be genetics, could be a factor, whether an individual will develop depression, or that would be like a sibling or a parent has depression. If that is the case, you might be more likely to get it. But that means you need an evaluation from a trained mental health professional. It's really important. You got to take inventory of your symptoms and do a physical and mental health history and make it sure it's thorough before suggesting any course of treatment. Some people might need some psychotherapy, which can teach people how to identify and change negative thought patterns. For some people, you might need some antidepressant medications, but lifestyle changes like regular exercise, going back to that sleep hygiene, we talk about that a lot, and a balanced diet with lots of fruit and vegetables, those can be helpful. Now, the Cleveland Clinic says that 80 to 90% of people who get treated for depression respond well, and that's a real positive sign. But if left untreated, depression can affect your work, your relationships, your daily activities, and you can put people at higher risk for heart disease, diabetes, pain, self harm, and even suicide. So it's important to help break the stigma surrounding depression. If people are embarrassed or ashamed of their struggles, it can affect whether they're going to reach out for help. And when we talk about it openly, it becomes easier to seek support. Nobody does this alone. Nobody, we're not an island. So depression's not a sign of weakness. Asking for self-help is a real sign of strength. And it can happen to anyone. So we really do have to take it very seriously. And if you have depression, you don't have to suffer alone because folks who have experienced depressive symptoms feel a series of guilt and shame. And they think they're going crazy, or they may have a strong belief that, that they're weak or that nobody else is experiencing. But that is the furthest thing from the truth. So we have to stress, and the experts stress, that comparing oneself to others can really get in the way of getting the help that you need. So we have to destigmatize any kind of depression or loneliness. It's not an individual affliction. We need to promote a community of compassion and understanding, and that is what's going to save lives. So reach out to someone, and again, whether you're a man or a woman, if you're feeling depressed or lonely, get involved with the community. Volunteering is a great way to make yourself feel better. We always say that, when you help others, you help yourself. So think about that and attempt to go that route. Well, that's the show for today. Make sure you're tuned to Starstyle Be the Star You Are every week for a new episode with me, Cynthia Brian. For more information about Starstyle, you can visit cynthiabrian.com. That's Brian with an I.com. And to get involved or to learn more about Be the Star You Are charity, please visit bethestaryouare.org. My aim is always to encourage, inspire, inform, amuse, and motivate you. See beyond your physical being. Know you already are the star you've dreamed of becoming. Cherish the past, dream of the future, and most of all, celebrate this moment because it really is all that we have. And pick up some books. Books are just an incredible way to help you feel less lonely and to be more involved. And I hope that you'll visit my website, cynthiabrian.com/books. I have 12 books out there, and they are available as a donation. Until next week, when we celebrate once again, remember that love always wins, kindness always prevails, but it's smiles that keep us happy. I'm Cynthia Brian for Starstyle. I thank you and encourage you to be kind, inclusive, truthful, live with integrity, embrace cultures, love unconditionally, encourage others, be generous, read, lead, succeed, and be your unapologetically authentic self because everyone counts. And most of all, go out into the world and be the star you are. You are unique, you are only you, and it is important that you savor this moment and share your dreams, your goals, and your talents. Thanks for joining me. We'll be together next week.